It's 2025, a new year and the best time to turn your great idea into a business. Shopify is how you're going to make it happen. Let me tell you how. Shopify makes it simple to create your brand, open for business, and get your first sale. Get your store up and running easily with thousands of customizable templates. All you need to do is drag and drop. Their powerful social media tools let you connect all your channels and create shoppable posts. Established in 2025. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/promo. All lowercase. Go to shopify.com/promo to start selling with Shopify today. Shopify.com/promo.
Quiet Riot. Welcome to Quiet Riot Sunday School, the whiskey chaser to Thursday's pint. I'm Naomi.
And I'm not Alexandria. I'm Kenny, who is hoping that Alex is enjoying his birthday weekend off. I know there was lots of partying and Greek singing last night that I saw, and I had to miss it. So I'm a little bit gutted. And also a lot less hungover than I would have been, though. Naomi, how was it?
It was really good fun, Kenny. It was a lovely, lovely evening. We missed you desperately, but Alex had the birthday party he deserved and is getting the weekend off that he so deserves. I don't think he's missed an episode yet in all the time that we've been running Quiet Riot. So
I know you love a bit of karaoke, and I know that there was a bit of singing going on last night. Were you doing the hits of Nana Mouskouri?
Unfortunately, my Greek is lesser, shall I say, than Alex and his family. So I didn't participate in any of the singing, but I did rhythmically clap along and provide some percussion to their beautiful melodic voices, which was absolutely lovely.
I used to do that years ago. I was at a conference in Dublin and I had to give a speech. And the night before the speech, as this is the sort of dumb thing I would do, we're out with the team and got ragingly drunk on Guinness in a big Dublin pub. And there was music playing and I'd drunk just enough Guinness not to be falling over, but so much that in my own mind, of course, I was the only person in the entire pub with any sense of rhythm. So I was banging on this table for hours, it must have been, keeping rhythm and just being a super pop hero in my own head. The next day, I got up to give my speech and I hadn't been paying much attention. I stood at the lectern and I looked down at my hand and my ring finger was green.
Oh my God.
I'd managed to break my finger because I was drumming so hard.
No, wowzers. No, I didn't do that. And I think there was just like this enormous sense of, thank God, the 859 days of January is over.
Oh, bring it on, I know.
So it was sort of not just a celebration of Alex's birthday, but thank God we're sort of through that awful first month of the year. What are we going to talk about today, Kenny? I was thinking that we do need to keep it quite international, pop our noses over the Atlantic, because there is a lot happening there. Obviously, the crash happened after we recorded the main show this week, and the DEI blaming Trump comments that ensued. There's also the mass deportations really kicking in. And as of today, when we record, tariffs have been imposed. So, yeah, I was thinking we should probably do quite a bit on the US.
It would be hard not to, wouldn't it? And rather than just looking over the Atlantic to the west, we could probably go a little bit east and jump over La Manche and analyse what's happening in Germany as they get ever closer to their polling day as well. It's all kicking off over there.
Quiet Riot. Within hours of the tragic crash in Washington on Thursday, when a commercial American Airlines plane collided with a military Black Hawk helicopter, killing everyone, Donald Trump took to the airwaves without evidence to blame the incident in no small part on DEI, that's diversity, equity and inclusion programs.
Are you saying this crash was somehow caused and the result of diversity hiring? And what evidence have you seen to support these claims?
It just could have been. We have a high standard. We've had a much higher standard than anybody else. And there are things where you have to go by brain power, you have to go by psychological quality, And psychological quality is a very important element of it. These are various very powerful tests that we put to use, and they were terminated by Biden.
It really does seem that there is no tragedy that man won't exploit or try to for political gain. Kenny, we're a few days on now. Is there any evidence that people with, and to quote Donald Trump, severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities can become air traffic controllers? Or is it more likely that they just end up president of the United States?
Yeah, the evidence is quite clear on that front. It's definitely much more likely that they end up in the White House. My understanding is that the barriers to becoming an air traffic controller are higher than the barriers to becoming an actual pilot when it comes to issues around mental stability and such like. So it's quite the reverse, really. No evidence at all. What there has been is a lot of toing and froing about which presidents have sacked how many air traffic controllers. And it all kicked up way back with Ronald Reagan, actually. And the flying world has never really forgiven Ronald Reagan for what he did to dismantle parts of that operation. And in Washington itself, actually, you get the side eye from pilots if you call it Reagan International Airport.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It runs that deep in the flying community. But yeah, there's been a history of struggling to fill the vacancies for air traffic control. There have always been gaps in the service. And America itself is a particularly challenging flying environment because of the way they run the rules over there. So honestly, it's not a job that anybody would take on lightly. To have the president go on TV and effectively badmouth not just the controllers who were in the tower on the night of the crash, the entire operation, the entire air traffic control operation, without any evidence anywhere in the world, we'd call obscene. Sadly, I think we were all sitting watching and going, right, it's still January. He's still in the first few weeks of his presidency, and here we go. Were you surprised?
I mean, to an extent I was. It was the sort of first big test of his ability to show whether he could be a leader and not a liar, as Pete Buttigieg phrased him as being a liar, not a leader, and he failed. Even if it were true, which it patently is not, that diversity and inclusion programs have meant that the standard requirement for the threshold of whether one can do a job or not, it wasn't the moment. And so it wasn't true, but it also wasn't the moment. The moment that the country needs then is an empathetic leader who can send their love and prayers and best wishes to the families of all of those affected, both in the military aircraft and on the commercial liner. It is to try and heal a country that will be in mourning for the loss of some of its most, prized ice skating athletes, and to, say that we will bring the full force of an inquiry into this to find out why mistakes were made and to prevent it happening again. But he just couldn't help himself but stay in campaigning mode. It's just unforgivable. And from everything I've read about DEI policies, well, they've been in post for a pretty long time, during which there has been no commercial incidents in the airs above the US for, I think, 20 years now. And also that they were designed to just make sure that you were encouraging people from diverse backgrounds to be able to apply. It didn't have anything to do with lowering the admissions requirements.
That's right. And I mean, it's just to return to 2 points you made there, was the need for somebody to step up and say the right things. Of course, it was Obama who gave probably the most presidential response to what happened, and it was what you would expect. It was sadness and empathy, and sociopaths like Trump obviously don't have that. But zooming out from the row around DEI for a moment, of course, what we saw with Trump there was a man who is congenitally incapable of standing on a stage and talking about anything without making the whole topic about himself. Much as it was utterly sickening to watch his performance this week, this was an incident that was predominantly an American incident with questions for American travelers, and albeit there were people from other countries on the plane. But you take Trump as he is right now and get him up on a stage talking about something of much more global significance, and you can see immediately just how perilous a situation it is. His ability to go on to X or Truth Social, read something, and then regurgitate it as if he's got access to information that nobody else has is quite remarkable.
Yeah.
The lack of self-awareness is painful, but it's not going to stop. I mean, it's the weekend. There's been a secondary crash.
Yes,
he'll be on the golf course, of course, so we'd expect to hear much less from him because he's got 36 holes to play, I dare say.
Yeah, I mean, and look, this isn't the only thing that's been happening, as we mentioned at the top of the show. Alongside all of this, ICE officers, so that's Immigration and Customs Enforcement, have been ramping up their efforts to detain with a view to deporting so-called illegal aliens. I looked it up. The Biden administration made an average of 282 immigration arrests per day in September 2024. And according to the most recent ICE data available so far, using 7 days of data, the Trump administration is averaging nearly 800 a day. On my social media, it is swamped with videos of Americans being stopped, papers demanded, aggressive altercations, and also thousands of people self-deporting, fearful that they might otherwise be separated from their children who are US citizens, despite having lived in America since their own childhoods, paying taxes, working hard. People saying, right, I've now got to try and get in touch with the Mexican embassy to get a passport that I've never had. I'm frightened to take my children to school in case I get stopped en route. I cannot risk being separated from my children. I've lived here for 30 years, since I was 5 years old, and my parents brought me here. I've paid taxes my whole life. I've been educated here. I've done my, postdoctoral research studies here. These are often highly talented people. And so do you think any of this might begin to backfire on the Trump administration? Could there even be a kind of potential brain drain out of the US during this administration?
I mean, the short answer is, of course, there is a risk. But in terms of backfire politically, what we know from our own experiences on this side of the Atlantic, and indeed, as we're going to talk about in a few minutes, in Germany, demonizing immigrants is not something that seems to present as big a political risk as we might wish it did. It's a very well-thumbed playbook, that one. In terms of a brain drain, there's plenty of discussion around that. Reminding ourselves what happened in Britain when we had our own issues with stopping people coming into the country. It was actually at the other end of the employment scale that the big problems really kicked in quickly, wasn't it? It was looking for people to work in relatively low-level jobs in the health service.
Hospitality, healthcare, social care.
Farming, all these sort of things where we relied on our friends in Europe to come over and do hundreds of thousands, if not millions of jobs. And that's a huge economic threat. If you are a farmer in California, for example, right now, staring down the barrel of, this time of year, it's probably a citrus harvest, losing tens of thousands of your key workers is an absolute disaster. And I expect to see more of that.
Yeah, I think my own view on it is that it'll probably end up being an atrophy rather than a cliff edge. And very much as we've seen with Brexit, it takes years for the penny to drop with everybody and for them to realise, okay, this is really hurting us. I guess the rich will feel it imminently if they're a rich industrial owner, farmer, as you mentioned, losing your, poultry workers, or if you're a, Upper East Side Manhattan dweller, all of a sudden your nannies and cleaners and drivers, etc., are facing the threat of deportation. They will feel it potentially quite quickly. But I think over time, the inflationary impact of these mass deportations will be felt by the average American, and they will blame him for it, but it'll be too late by then. It'll be the slow burn realization that this was a ridiculous thing to do.
I mean, before we leave the United States behind, today marks the day that Trump's tariffs on imports from China, Canada and Mexico start to roll out. And he's still threatening Europe with tariffs and quite possibly us in the UK as well, though he hasn't set a date yet, and that's probably to his advantage in many ways. But what do you think that means for the American economy and potentially for us as well?
Well, for the US, it almost certainly will have an inflationary effect, particularly, as I say, when combined with mass deportations. Because while the cost of tariffs can be absorbed by some combination of US businesses that import goods, the customers who purchase them and the foreign businesses that export them are going to be bearing the brunt of those costs. And even the right-leaning tax foundation in the US found that previous tariffs levied by Trump during his first term were paid by the US business sector and their customers. Goldman Sachs, not notoriously left-wing, have economists that have projected prices on consumer goods in America will go up by 0.1% for every percentage increase in the effective tariff rate. And that, of course, will then raise inflation rates for 1 year. And they note that in addition to the price of imported goods going up, it's likely that the price of domestic goods is going to go up as well, because US manufacturers will rationally, I suppose, as business people do, opportunistically raise their prices to take advantage of having less competition in the marketplace. So we all understand the very fundamentals of demand and supply. And when you restrict supply, you are going to see price rises. And Trump, he's conceded this, that there will be short-term disruption in the very least, and admitted that some costs will be passed on to consumers. In true Trump style, he said he's not worried about that. He's not worried about how the market's going to react to that decision, because for him, it is all about bringing it back to illegal migration. I mentioned this when we did the shows immediately after the inauguration and the kind of the main show that we did a couple of days later, that in his second speech that he made at the inauguration in the Emancipation Hall to all of his supporters and backers, he basically said, I know that the number one issue for voters at the election was the cost of living and the prices they're paying when they go to get groceries and at the fuel pumps. But that's wrong. They're wrong to think that that is their main problem. Their main problem is illegal aliens. And he's just constantly wanting to bring it back to division and othering of people that he doesn't consider to be true Americans. You also asked me what it's going to mean for the rest of the world. Trump is going to use the universal tariff threat to just bully other countries. That's effectively what he's doing, bullying them into buying more from the US, particularly things like defense equipment, and to just be Team Trump when it comes to his other endeavors, i.e., if you are a corporate or a nation state that comes out and tells me you love me, I'll let you off the hook. And if you don't, fuck you, I'm going to slap a tariff on you. I mean, it's classic bully boy tactics. If you're not with me, you're completely against me, and I'm going to make you pay for it. And when we look at, China tariffs, the UK will probably need to decide whether US tariffs are preferable to the Chinese retaliatory tariffs that will probably come in. It's more likely that countries will attempt to find a kind of just right Goldilocks zone in which they will impose some additional tariffs on China, so possibly ones they were considering anyway, in the hope that that doesn't provoke Trump too much, might even placate him a bit so that he doesn't slap them on you in the UK. And in the EU, this is probably going to mean things like electric vehicle battery tariffs, steel tariffs, maybe tariffs on green products like solar and wind, and in the UK, probably electric vehicle tariffs as well. Will it work? We don't know. But once you start throwing the talk of tariffs about, the risk of unintended consequences rises really, really sharply.
One huge difference, I think, between Trump 2 and Trump 1, particularly with regards to China, is that I think that we would be naive to think that the Chinese have not been getting much better prepared for this Trump presidency than they were for the last Trump presidency.
And you need to look no further than DeepSeek.
Yeah, well, isn't that just the truth? There was, I mean, in terms of sort of almost non-trade things that the Chinese could be doing, before Christmas, China issued dollar bonds in Saudi Arabia. I think it was the first time they'd issued dollar bonds in Saudi Arabia in about 3 years. It was no coincidence that they chose Saudi Arabia, I think, either. That debt that the Chinese were selling was going for with almost the same price as American dollar debt. And it didn't get much coverage at the time, but I remember reading about this and thinking, yeah, hello, somebody is laying the groundwork for a Trump presidency here in ways that we cannot even imagine. And it's not just going to be about who charges tariffs on electric vehicles or the batteries for electric vehicles. China has got an awful lot more levers to pull than perhaps we realize. It's a real case of buckle in. This is going to be a rough old ride, I suspect.
Yeah, very much. And at Best of Britain, we've been doing some work on this. So call to action being, please, if you've not done it yet, do go over to bestofbritain.org/join. It's free. Don't worry. Join doesn't mean you have to give us money, although please, if you can do, because this work is incredibly expensive. But we've been doing some modelling on the impact of Trump tariffs, particularly in light of the potential trade deal improvement that the UK and the EU are embarking on over the next few months. After we record, there is going to be a summit with Maros Sefcovic and Nick Thomas-Symonds in Brussels this week. We are pretty certain that there will be a von der Leyen and Starmer summit happening this side of Easter. All of that will be kicking off in earnest. And what I've wanted to do at Best of Britain is to make sure that we've got the numbers. We know what Trump tariffs could do to Europe, to the UK, and what that then might mean for the reset relationship between the EU and the UK in terms of shielding ourselves from the worst impacts of that. So it's important work. Of course, there'll be some delicious MRP to accompany it as well. And so, losers, if you're as data geekery and nerdy as me, head on over to bestofbritain.org/join, and then you'll be the first to hear about all of that as and when we publish.
Quiet Riot.
Now, this is a paid advertisement for BetterHelp Therapy Online, who are sponsoring today's episode. Big thank you to them, and here's a little more about their service. 2025 has already thrown some huge stories at us, and you might wish that life came with some instructions on how to write your story for the year ahead. Something you could refer to when you're a bit stuck or unable to get a handle on things. If you lose power, you call an electrician. You don't stumble around endlessly in the dark. Well, therapists are trained to help you find your way around your inner environment and teach you the skills to cope. As the world's biggest online therapy service, BetterHelp, that's H-E-L-P, has matched millions of people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists, all 100% online. You just fill out a simple questionnaire and they'll find the right person for you quickly and at an affordable price. You can change your therapist anytime if it's not clicking. And you can arrange to discuss things on video, call, or even text chat at a time that suits you. That means no waiting or searching for the right help. You can talk to someone quickly and easily. With over 5,000 therapists in the UK already, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a wide variety of expertise in mental health. Write your story with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/quietriot. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/quietriot.
Quiet Riot.
Now to Germany. It's a country that we could once rely upon to supply us with plenty of stolid, non-flashy politics, but which is now in such a political mess that even Angela Merkel has re-entered the fray. In the week that commemorated the liberation of Auschwitz, an unprecedented situation arose in the German parliament, whereby the CDU's influx limitation law was brought to the chamber with the support of the far-right AfD party. And this broke the long-standing firewall between mainstream parties in Germany that had kept the AfD and the far-right as far away from the levers of power as was politically expedient. Now, a non-binding motion was passed on Wednesday and then narrowly rejected later by only 350 to 338 out of the 693 MPs who voted. CDU leader Friedrich Merz came under criticism from within his own party, eventually, and also from Angela Merkel herself for breaking this firewall. There were protesters outside the Bundestag labelling him not a Brandmauer, a firewall, but a Brandstifter, an arsonist, and apologies if my German isn't up to scratch.
We'll get Annette to correct us, don't worry.
Oh, there's so many people will correct me, and they'll correct me in medieval German as well. That's the sort of people I hang out with. But how big and how significant a shift in protocol is this, Naomi?
It's huge. It's absolutely huge. And Merz was cruising to victory. Let's remember that.
Yeah.
But he got greedy. He broke his own statement. He riled up national treasure Angela Merkel, and he split the CDU. And what did he achieve? What was that for? Because he's basically given people an argument to vote AfD. And until now, his CDU party had a really solid lead, albeit one that was narrowing over the AfD. And the events of the last few days could change everything. And the scenes outside the Bundestag, I mean, go on social media and have a look at some of the videos.
Exactly.
It was proper protest at the breaking of this firewall. It was absolutely incendiary thing to do. And according to a poll by INSA, 66% of Germans support Merz's plans, and that includes 56% of people who back Scholz, the SDP. However, all of that said, both the CDU and CSU and SPD have lost ground in the polls in recent days. The AfD gained 4 percentage points. And the first opinion poll on Friday since the Wednesday vote showed that the AfD's position, has more or less stayed at that level in advance of the election. It's second in the polls with 22%. And Merz's CDU-CSU was down 1 percentage point to 29%, and Scholz and the Greens gaining. In fact, the SPD, that's Scholz's party, has gained a couple of points and is now at 17%, which is probably the best it's been since the end of last year.
That's what we look for, isn't it? As in our polling friends, we're looking for trends, individual polls.
Exactly right, Kenny. So for now, it does seem unlikely still that the AfD will form part of any ruling coalition government. But, we've got 23 days to go. It could surge in that time, but even if it has a bit of a bump, it's still unlikely. And there remains a clear majority of pro-EU, anti-far-right parties in Germany that just would never work with the AfD. And it would probably take a monumental shift to change that. But it's all about signalling, and what happens in Germany inevitably impacts elsewhere in Europe and even beyond. We only need to look to Hungary, where Orban, of course, is already celebrating the AfD's breakthrough in the migration vote, and other radical nationalists are just going to be emboldened across the region. And economically, the risk for Europe will be if this election ushers in a period of real instability. The EU economy is already facing immense challenges, not least because of the aggressive Trump tariffs that may be coming from across the Atlantic and competition from China as well. But I really want to talk about the Merkel intervention, Kenny, and just how big a deal her decision was to wade into this debate.
Well, I do not know what German for a big fat stinky deal is, particularly in medieval German. But after Wednesday's extremely controversial vote, there was predictable noise and criticism of Merz's Christian Democratic Union from his political opponents. But one of the things that are noticed that was within the CDU itself, people were keeping fairly stumm. Understandably.
That is a German word.
Is it good?
Or
That's one that I've got right.
I don't know.
It's Dutch. Stumm? Don't know. Email us, listeners, and let us know. But, with the CDU keeping relatively quiet, and, you could see they were trying to keep a lid on it. But then comes that moment when Merkel reanimates as a political player in many ways. She was absolutely, categorical what she was saying. She said, I consider it wrong to abandon this commitment and, as a result, to knowingly allow a majority with AfD votes in the Bundestag for the first time. She couldn't have been clearer. Now, something that we should be clear about, of course, is that there's politics going on here on various levels as well, as there always is with these sorts of things. Merkel has had a beef with Merz for a quarter of a century, if not more. For those that don't follow German politics, at the turn of the millennium, Merkel and Merz were rivals for the party leadership. And way back in 2002, she effectively locked him out of the CDU leadership when she claimed the parliamentary group chairmanship for herself. That was the big job.
She smelled the wrong one.
Didn't she just?
She clocked him early. Good woman.
She's nothing if not an astute political operator, isn't she? Even way back then. And that was really the beginning of the end for that phase of Merz's political career. Because, in Christmas 2004, he resigned. And then he kind of just slipped back into the background from politics, kind of like that Homer Simpson meme where Homer walks backwards into a hedge. He just withdrew from politics and focused very much on his legal career. And then he left Parliament entirely in 2009, focusing on law, and didn't come back until 2021, like a bad smell, some might say. So Merkel and Merz have got proper history, and since Merz returned as leader in 2022, he's quite clearly moved the party further to the right, and he's undone in large parts of Merkel's legacy, especially, surprise, surprise, on migration. And these things matter. On the other hand, Merkel herself, since she stepped down, there have been various books and such like, but she's largely kept it zipped when it comes to commenting on contemporary political issues. She's played the elder stateswoman role as well as you'd expect from Merkel. It's the breaking of that self-imposed silence to condemn her own party leader, no less, and just 3 weeks before the election, that has proved to be somewhat inevitably incendiary. And it set the scene for what is going to be a fascinating CDU party conference, which gets underway, depends when you're listening to this, gets underway tomorrow, Monday. Naomi, have we got any idea at all what's going to happen at that party conference?
Well, look, he's going to want to capitalise on the conference to move away from the focus solely on migration and the whole debate around having broken that firewall. He's going to want to make noise about Germany's economic woes. I think he's going to be presenting a 15-point plan for economic measures, and I'm assuming that there will be, an enormous chunk of his speech dedicated to that. Will he succeed?
Yeah, what do you think? The debate around immigration is only going to get more and more unpleasant, unfortunately, this year, isn't it? Because we haven't sorted out the debate in this country. In Germany, they are having huge issues around it. And our friend Trump, as we've just been discussing, is making immigration the center plank of his alleged set of policies as well. So will he succeed in getting people to talk about a 15-point plan for economic measures? Really? There might be some headlines in there, but the 100,000 people who were demonstrating in Germany in the middle of this week, they're much more concerned about what we might describe as moral issues. And I don't expect that Merz is going to have much success when it comes to turning media focus away from the debate around migration. And the fact that he's broken one of the cardinal rules, and one of your favorite rules, Naomi, which is, when something's not broken, don't fix it. And when other people are making mistakes, don't interrupt them. So much of what's happening in Germany right now is down to some quite significant own goals, isn't it? So, bring on Monday. And for those of us that follow polling, brace yourselves, because the number of polls coming out of Germany over the next 2 to 3 weeks is going to be absolutely terrifying, I suspect.
And we'll have Anna Dittert, our in-house expert on all things German elections, to give us the download very, very soon.
Quiet Riot. Hey there, Ryan Reynolds here. It's a new year, and you know what that means. No, not the diet. Resolutions. A way for us all to try and do a little bit better than we did last year. And my resolution, unlike big wireless, is to not be a raging and raise the price of wireless on you every chance I get. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The new year brings new health goals and wealth goals. Protecting your identity is an important step. LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, LifeLock's restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Resolve to make identity health and wealth part of your New Year's goals with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Quiet Riot.
All right, Naomi, I couldn't help but notice that we skipped Grin and Share It on the main show this week because Zoe was such a fascinating guest that we had to give her extra airtime. So, on the basis that we all need a bit of cheer, have you got
Especially
something to
after
cheer
that
us up with?
last 20 minutes of the show.
Please cheer us up with something that will put a smile on our faces today.
Good news is welcome to me. Bad news is hell come to me. Good news. Do-de-o-do-do, 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 I want good news.
Well, it is something that I can really only dream of, I can tell you. And that is a 4-day working week.
Woo-hoo!
I think I do an 8-day working week if you toss up my hours, maybe even more. But this is good news. So a group of 200 UK organisations, a mixture of private sector, charities, and I think even a local authority, have signed a pledge that company work weeks will be shortened to 4 days without a loss in pay.
Ooh.
So it's marketing firms and advertising, tech, IT, software charities, as I say, and the companies between them employ more than 5,000 people. It's all been organised by the 4-Day Week Foundation, who say a happier, more balanced workforce is key to driving productivity and therefore output.
Mind you, so to be fair, is trying to do the same amount of work in 4 days where you don't actually produce anymore, but the figures look like you do.
That balance, they argue, can be achieved by far more people through the reduction of a 5-day week to a 4-day one. And economists broadly say that with all other things being equal, if enjoying more free time leads to greater employee retention and motivation, then these kind of 4-day week firms will begin to outcompete traditional ones, which in turn will be forced to adapt or risk losing market share. And certainly the evidence from Japan seems to suggest that the 4-day week is strengthening productivity there. Notably, though, London firms are the most enthusiastic about this. So I think nearly 60% of the 200 workplaces are located in the capital. It's probably unsurprising because you've got a huge war for talent in London and the southeast, many firms looking for talented workers to choose from. So perhaps no wonder that they're seeking to get some advantage in attracting people through a more desirable work pattern. And, you know, Kenny, how many more Quiet Riot episodes could I record if I didn't have to work 5 days a week or more in my substantive day job?
There aren't enough hours in the day. Actually, genuine question in that, because the 4-day working week is a topic that's come up lots of times in recent years. You sort of joke about how many more episodes you could record if you only did a 4-day working week. Do you think that's a real risk, that actually you give people an extra day off and what they do is go and get an extra job and spend Friday with their side hustle and end up on Monday morning even more exhausted than they would have been with the old-fashioned 5-day working week?
Well, look, as I mentioned, the research from Japan and elsewhere seems to suggest not, and that people enjoy their leisure time and family time and the flexibility that kind of work pattern gives them with managing childcare or elderly parent care or whatever it is, or, just listening to a bloody decent podcast with their feet up.
Yeehaw.
Who knows? Let's see how it plays out. I know quite a few organizations in the campaigning world do a 9-day fortnight. So rather than a 4-day week, it's sort of every other Friday, the office is closed. My team, if you're listening, we've got quite a lot to do this year in the run up to the Brexit reset. I can't promise we'll be bringing in anything like that anytime soon, but we are pretty good at giving people extra time off.
It's phenomenal how I'm thinking back to when I did my first ever job in newspapers, which was at a newspaper called the Press and Journal up in Aberdeen. And when I started up there as a trainee, way back in the 17th century or whatever the hell it was, there used to be this fabulous rota system where you did 2 days on, 2 days off, 2 days on. And the way it worked out was that every 3 weeks, the way the rota worked out anyway, you got a 5-day break. And literally you'd get Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I mean, you could get absolutely steaming drunk and have 2.5 full days to recover from it. And that was just plugged into your sort of regular working week. You didn't ever have to take holidays because you had this 5-day break that came up at least once a month. And if you worked on your time off, you'd get sort of time and a half as well. And it was such a happy way to work in so many ways.
Well, there we have it, everybody. Kenny's campaign for a 4-day week so that he can have extra drinking time on a Friday.
I have become the cliched Scottish person, haven't I? Oh, well. Thank you, Naomi. Much needed cheer. And listeners, as ever, we'll drop a link in the show notes so you can not just grin with your good news, but you can also share your good news. Quiet Riot. And on that cheery note, let's leave it there for today. Thank you for helping me navigate my first Sunday school, Naomi.
My absolute pleasure, Kenny. Thank you for letting Alex have a lie-in. And to everyone at home, thank you for tuning in. And remember to use your Sunday morning to sign up to back us at ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod if you've not already done so, and if you are in a position to help.
And not least because that means that you can join our Discord channel and get the chance to meet and chat with other Quiet Rioters who are, it must be said, a rather splendid bunch.
We'll be back on Thursday where I'll be fresh from a trip to Brussels, hopefully armed with lots of good news.
Well, good luck with your trip. And in the meantime, have a great week. And remember, we love you lots. Bye.
See ya.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Alex Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simona Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Soundstone Global.
Quiet Riot. Oh, are you still there?
Yeah, but it's you next.
Oh! Right, I've got to put my glasses on properly. Oh. It was all going so well, wasn't it?